Welcome home, where we provide information, inspiration, and motivator after motivator after motivator here on America's Next. I have Joe Toles here with me today. How you doing, Joe?
I'm good, Cedric. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, quite well. Are you up here in New York? Where are you these days?
I am in Alabama. I moved here about a year ago.
In Alabama, huh?
Yes, sir.
You know, I have family down there in Alabama, and every time I've gone down there, it's always been a good time, warm weather, and plenty of cars. What's your experience like down there?
Well, I moved to a college town. I moved to the city where I graduated. I went to Auburn University and moved back to Auburn. It's a college town, so there's a lot of activity, lots of athletics, lots of culture, and it is absolutely warmer. So I like that.
Yeah. Now Auburn is known for their running backs. They've got good running backs on their football teams, legacy wise. Are you familiar?
I am very familiar. I actually got here because I got a track scholarship. So I was a Division I track athlete back in the day, and got from New York to here. And so I was dorming and hobnobbing with all those guys.
Right. Oh, wow. So you were an athlete.
A long time ago in a land far away, seems.
Once an athlete, always an athlete. When did you start running though? When did you start that?
I started probably in junior high school. I was living in Long Island, in Uniondale, New York, and was looking for a place to have my day extended really away from home. I grew up in foster care, and so school was like sort of my safe haven. So I went over to the track team one day, and as my coach would tell you, I was running around like an idiot. And that was the beginning of the road for me, because I got on the track team. First couple of seasons didn't really do anything, and then all of a sudden it was sort of like magic, sort of like a blessing from above, that everything sort of kicked in. It was awkward. So probably physically I developed a little, probably mentally, because I was now part of something that I had not had before. Yeah. And boy, when it kicked in, it kicked in.
Absolutely. That's a good narrative right there, that we all, if not the vast majority of us, I'd like to say all, everybody has something inside that's just waiting to flourish, and it's waiting to be discovered and tapped into. And for you, even before or during the time that you went into foster care, you use school as a place to kind of dig in and see what you can get involved with, and track kind of broadened your horizons.
Absolutely. It was a place to, track and school was a place to, it was unique to me, right? It was my experience in the school was unique to me, and it was different. So I received different messages at the school that I was not receiving in the home.
Absolutely.
And luckily I believed them. There's too many kids that grow up in the system or in their own homes, and they're getting negative messages, and they sort of stick to those, and they're figuratively beaten into them, and they believe it, and then they lose sort of hope. School gave me hope. It made me hopeful.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely relate to that. School gave me hope as well. It's a place where you get exposed to so many more adults than the one or two adults that are running your home. You get exposed to so many more young people who they think different ways. Some of these young people, they're extremely funny, they're extremely talented, and all these different influences kind of clue you in on the fact that there's a bigger world out there, and it makes you excited about your own future. Now, how old were you when you went into foster care?
I was born into foster care. I was right from the hospital. So I was in 3 homes before I ended up where I was, and stayed there and aged out of foster care at my foster home. So I was in a home for a very long time. And I wasn't the only foster child. There were several of us. There were, there were 6 core children, and 2 of those children were their biological children, and then the 4 of us. But there were other kids that came and left in the meantime, and really with no explanation. So it sort of made my perception of life or home unstable, because I didn't know if it was going to be the next one to go.
Right.
Not knowing why or the ins and outs of foster care.
Did you ever find out why you were placed in foster care?
Yes, my mother was 16. I'm sorry, she was 15. My father was 16.
Oh, wow.
I am 61. So this is 1959, Long Island. Mm-hmm. And my father was African American and my mother was not. So there were whole lots of things happening for the time that, they certainly couldn't take care of me, didn't have the means and the resources, and society wasn't the same as it is. Society was different.
Yeah. Would you say that in an era like that, we're talking the late 50s, where a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old has a child, they're pretty much looked at as children themselves. Do you think that in that era, it's almost like you had to go into some sort of placement? Oh,
I had to. I can't even imagine. I mean, I do remember, so I was, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and everything was, or society was more predictable in that it was shame-based and people had a place and you only had a few choices. So there were no choices back then and it was scandalous. I mean, having a child out of wedlock, and certainly a mixed race child, was scandalous. And so people hid that information. And there was, today we have counselors. I happen to be one, that, people have a place to talk, but then you didn't. It was really more shame-based. And so people kept those secrets inside their families.
So let me get this straight. Not only were you situated into foster care almost by design, but you also had to deal with discrimination because you were a mixed child from a very young age. Is that correct?
Well, it's very interesting. I was placed in a home where my mother was from Barbados. My foster mother was from Barbados, but she was white. She had red hair and freckles, and very fair skin. My father was an African American man, very dark skin. So it's not like I felt it in growing up. But it was in an era where my mother made sure we sat and watched every memorial service for anybody who was assassinated at the time. We were talking about Malcolm X and witnessing George Wallace on the steps of the University of Alabama, blocking African American students from entering. The Kennedys, all of that was happening, but they made sure that we sat and we watched and we participated in those historic events, which turned out to be very historic events.
Right.
But in terms of feeling it, then I didn't feel it until I got older. My family was mixed, obviously. My brothers were of all different. We were just all a melting pot.
Yeah.
And it didn't really. Race never really affect me until I got to later in high school, and certainly when I left New York to attend school in Alabama.
Sure. And the reason I asked that was because when you realized that it was scandalous that you were in the system and that you were also a mixed child, I'm wondering, how did you pick up on that? But as you looked around, you're looking at different events on the news, but there's love everywhere, because it's almost like when you're in the system, the other kids who are in the system with you, in a home with you, y'all love each other. So you're not really thinking about race. But like you're saying, as you got older, you started to realize the overall context that you were born in.
Yes, and I'm very optimistic. So I tend to lean towards people who have positive energy as opposed to negative energy. I mean, that's simplifying it, but I was always around people who were willing to lift me up other than, the reverse, which was to tear me down. So that is not how it worked out for my other siblings. But I had this view. I was sort of wired differently in that I'm always going towards the light.
Right. Did you become a member of kind of the core of the family because of that optimistic view? Is that the reason why you weren't one of the kids always coming and going in that home that you talked about?
Well, I'm not sure. Both of my foster parents are now deceased, and they lacked really good parenting skills to begin with. In fact, my foster father left one day to go to a wedding right before I was entering junior high school, and he never returned. There were events, lots of events within our own house that were kept secret and private. So now, if a father leaves the family in foster care, you tell the agency that's responsible. Well, we had to keep that a secret for a very long time because my mother, although she loved us, everything was secret, everything was tight, everything was closed. You couldn't share information outside of the walls of the home. So that's another thing that I didn't embrace. Actually, I'm the blabbermouth of the family. Let's just talk. And so I think, and I really, there's no explanation for that other than I'm wired that way.
Right.
But I think that was my saving grace, that I could see things. I do not qualify things as good or bad.
Okay.
So they just are.
Yeah.
So I approach every situation as like, this is what I have. What do I do with it?
Mm-hmm. Talk about that gift of objectivity and that gift of being able to remain neutral. I think that's a huge missing ingredient for a lot of people. Did you pick that up, or were you wired that way, as you were saying?
I think I was always wired that way, and because I always sought out or seemed to be surrounded by people who felt the same, it was just reinforced. Nobody led me to look at the world that way, and of course, part of that was a protective mechanism. Mm-hmm. If I didn't qualify it as good or bad, I could get through it, right? So I could always see the end of a bad situation. So that's not to say that I didn't experience pain or discomfort, but I always knew that there was going to be an end to it. And I think that's a missing part for a lot of people. I'm also a New York State mental health counselor. Okay. And so when I work with kids, it's those kids that get stuck and can't move forward that have the most difficulty with life. They can't see their way out of it, or they're so stuck in the moment that was so uncomfortable that they just can't move. It consumes them and it controls them.
In your experience, have you come across a way through conversations, experiences, and new relationships that we can potentially rewire a young person who might not be having a positive perspective the way you did?
That's difficult, right? Because that takes sort of a societal change. All our news we get and all of it's all directed towards like one way of thinking, right? Trying to come up with the right words for this.
Well, I just want to add something to that. I spent years of my life in foster care. I was also someone who tended to follow the light, mostly because my grandmother told me to. But through different foster care placements, I had an attitude because I didn't know who my father was. I had an attitude because my mother passed away while we were in foster care. I was a very positive person, but I had an attitude. But when I got adopted, it sort of rewired my perspective. And so I think that adoption plays a role in rewiring the perspective. Can you speak to that?
Well, it gives permanency, right? Yeah, like adoption is a sort of a finalization and acceptance of who you are, right? And then you become, if you're allowed to think that way, you belong somewhere. I never got adopted.
Okay.
So there was always that difference of like nobody wants me. Now this is not something that I always think about, and it stops me. I have my issues, and those issues will be my issues for the rest of my life. It is that little boy that I was that always advises me on how to approach new situations. I have to sometimes remember that I am not less because I hadn't been adopted. Now, we hadn't gotten to this part, but I have adopted 7 boys, and I'm working on number 8.
Wow.
And the only difference between all of us, because we all grew up in foster care, is that I have not been adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And that I can sit here and tell you that tells you that it's still something that I think about.
Right.
Right. So not that the permanency is going to be magical or, it's not going to take anything else away. But it does add a sense of security, right? Certainly when you're younger. Now at 61, it's not going to do anything for me. But belonging is an important thing. Everybody wants to belong.
Right.
And
so when I think about the things that you're saying right now, I'm realizing that we have a sense of urgency that we need to continue to feel for hundreds of thousands of youth who are still in the foster care system today, who are not adopted. Everybody will not be adopted. And I think that we should also be on a campaign to get to those young people who are never adopted, because like you're saying today, it's going to take a lot of support and it's going to take a lot of awareness and strong relationships for you to never sit back and realize that you're hurt. At any given moment, you could realize that you're actually hurting.
Absolutely. And you never know. And I'll tell you a story. I was in my 40s. I was the director of a clinical program for visiting nurse services of New York. I had recently, and I had been doing the research over and over and over, trying to find out who I was and who my family was. So I had found my grandmother, my biological grandmother, and I sent my resume, I sent pictures, I sent everything. I was pretty, or I thought pretty proud of myself. Mm-hmm. And I sent it to her. And then one day I was leaving work and I grabbed my mail and I got on an express bus. At that time, I was living in the Bronx, from the Empire State Building to go to Co-op City in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And I was flipping through my mail and I saw that there was a letter from her, and I got really excited. I opened it up, and she said that we should have been aborted. And I could not control myself. I was weeping. I was, in my early 40s, weeping on an express bus. There are no stops to get off. And I didn't predict, didn't understand, or didn't even plan for a rejection. And the rejection was so painful that I couldn't control myself. It was a horrible moment in my life. But it taught me not that I suggest everybody have a horrible moment to teach you this, that I am still vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, I became that little boy that was placed in the foster care.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned to what my protective boundaries are,
Right.
where to step out in the world and where to be careful. That's what we need to teach each other how to make people feel welcome and accepted. And then we need to help them and society understand what our real boundaries are. And those are moving targets, right? 5 years ago, I was much safer as part of society.
Why you say that?
Well, because things happened in the world that I never thought I would see in my life. So we're really talking about politics and the way that politics impacts our society. So I had never thought I would see an African American man get elected president. That happened. And then I was afraid what would happen because of that. Then reelected, never thought that would happen. And then all of that comfort and that sort of exhale and that sort of relaxation has been swept away in the last 4 years. These are not conversations that are easy to have, especially if you live in a multicultural society.
Well, it goes along with some things that I've been thinking about for a while. I realized that we need to have bigger awareness about the fact that foster care exists in our country, and it's huge, and everybody needs to know about it. Sometimes, just for research purposes, I'll stop somebody inside the local Subway restaurant. And I'll ask them, "Hey, you familiar with foster care?" You'd be surprised how many people still say no,
Yeah.
or not really, right? But we are at a critical juncture where so many people need more love. I think that we need to change the paradigm that we live in as a society. And it's not okay for everybody to just go their own way. It's not okay for everybody to have a skin tone mindset. We need to realize the need for, I mean, your biggest, most favorite stadiums couldn't even hold the amount of young people who are waiting to be adopted today. You know, imagine 2 or 3 of your favorite stadiums, Dallas Cowboy stadiums, 2 or 3 of them full of young people with no parents. And what are we doing to bring about healing in their lives? What are we doing to not be a predator in somebody's life like that? What are we doing to not be hurtful in the life of someone like that? Because if I'm somebody who's not savory and my integrity is not totally intact, it matters that I understand your background and don't do the same jokes and games that I've done with everybody with you. But the world doesn't talk about foster care enough. The world doesn't talk about adoption enough. And we need to.
They do. They talk about Superman, and they talk about Batman and Spider-Man, and
Moses.
All of those, yes, all of the plenty of superhero characters have been in foster care or lost their parents or were raised by somebody else or were adopted. But it's easy to look at those examples of foster care because what happens at the end? They have superpowers and they have super abilities to overcome all of the world's obstacles. But the reality is that they look like me, they look like you, they look like little kids who are, I won't even go to, well, I guess I will go to, the 666 kids who were removed from their parents, over the past year and a half that now are in foster care.
Yeah. And not to mention, some of them look like adults. Some of them are 22, 23, 24.
Yes.
And they still need parents.
Right.
And so it's people who look like all of us who are living a life with no parents and no effective relationship to feel like I'm a closed circuit. When you don't feel like you're a closed circuit because you have a meaningful relationship that's helping you sustain your life, then you can never be rewired. And so you're constantly the product of trauma. You're constantly the product of trying to be optimistic with a load that's too heavy to bear. Now, before we go on to break, I found a really cool video that you created, and it involves several comic book stars or heroes, if you will. I'm going to play it shortly. Oh, yeah, everybody. November is Adoption Awareness Month. It's National Adoption Month. Give me 1 second. The incredible story of Toles.
Hey everybody, it's World Adoption Day. From my family to yours. Consider adoption.
Well, I didn't know you were gonna talk about that one, but that's my point. You know that we do have all of these images, right? And I'm on fire about trying to get people to pay attention to the fact that there is a thing called foster care, and that was my attempt to sort of draw them in with all of the interest we have now in all the superheroes. Well, talk about the superheroes.
Yeah. I believe that youth in the foster care system today have the potential, each and every one of them, to become America's next motivators. It's the reason why this platform exists. And I agree with you, Joe. We need to be on fire about the cause of helping to get families for young people, being a support system for them, and raising awareness going forward. We're going to be right back with the second half of this show with Joe Toles. America's Next Motivator, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern. America's Next Motivator, hosted by me, Cedric Riley, and sponsored by the Pride Empowerment Network. Joe, how you feeling out there?
Good. I was real happy when I see another organization doing something like the Pride Empowerment Network. I had never heard of them, so I'm really, and that ad that they just had was wonderful.
Well, this is a home for the belief in permanency, family, and events for youth in the foster care system. That's actually my organization, Joe. And I am deep into the cause of motivating every single youth in a foster care system today. So that's my advertisement. If nobody else is going to advertise here on the show, I'll do it myself. And I encourage each and everybody to continue to tune into America's Next Motivator.
That was a great ad. I am going to advertise it.
Wow. Okay. So now back to the story. I gotta stop for a moment. I am really being impacted by the things that you're saying and the conversation that we're having. It's tough to talk and to produce a broadcast when we're actually talking about real life. Everything that we're talking about today is real. There are people out there right now who are counting on us to have a conversation like this in hopes that it has a positive impact on people, but that it inspires somebody to go out there and be a better parent, choose to adopt. You can't always adopt a baby, but when you adopt, or even when you mentor somebody who was never adopted, you make the world a better place. So now, Joe, what did you do after high school?
Well, I went to Auburn. I went to Auburn University on a track scholarship. Really the first real time that I was away from, sort of the system. And I got an athletic scholarship, and I got a degree in psychology. I ran my butt off, two-time All-American and captain of the team, which I'm very proud of. And then left here as quickly as I got here. I wanted to be back in New York. And so then after that, I went to grad school. I went to graduate school at Brooklyn College. And at that point, I wanted to be a sports psychologist. So I have a master's in sports psychology. But the work that I did, I got introduced to community service. And so my first job was working for a program called United Families of the South Bronx, where we worked with families that had children under the age of 18. It was a preventive service program. So we were there solely to keep the family together and make sure that everything was okay so that children would not be placed into the system. And we worked with families that were being placed into city-owned housing from the shelter system.
Okay. And
that was so satisfying. That work was satisfying. Now, I learned a lot. I grew up on Long Island. I was not from the city. Saw and met people that were just incredible. I worked at Rikers Island for 3 years in an education program, met more people and experiences that I never would have if I stayed on Long Island in my little bubble, or if I stayed here in Alabama. And went to Planned Parenthood of New York City, and I ran an after-school program, a graffiti project, all sort of preventive services, until I met somebody and realized that I wasn't going to get a whole lot of the benefits that I wanted if I kept working for not-for-profit community-based organizations.
Okay.
And so I was lucky enough to have the education that I transferred over to education. And so I began working in the public school system, and worked in the public school system until I retired 5 years ago now, and coached track and field every year since I left here. So I've been coaching since 1982. Again, I retired about 5 years ago now.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about what you learned when you were working in the school system? I know that it's a world that many of us get to actually see and understand the real dynamics of the children in our communities. What did you learn during your time there?
Well, you can imagine that my perspective is a whole lot different from, people who didn't have my path.
Right.
So I'm ferocious. So, I learned that all kids are the same. I originally started, the first job I had was in the Yonkers public school system, which, just in my estimation, I think it's probably fair, was not as organized, and the teaching population and administration population was not a good representation of the actual students that were in the school district.
Mm-hmm.
And felt a real purpose, a real sort of role model sensibility working in a system like that. But it was difficult. And so then I left and I got a job out on Long Island in a school district called Harborfield Central School District, and wondered, would I have the same impact? Would I have the same comfortability working with a economically and ethnically different background of students, and I learned that students are students are students, kids are kids are kids. Problems may be different, but they all have the same feelings, so I learned that, I think, fairly quickly. I'm really sort of tied to people's emotions and energy. So that was almost an immediate, it probably was like 6 months, but really immediate lesson, and like an aha moment, that it doesn't matter. I don't matter. It's how I interact and make people feel that matters the most.
I like that. I like that. When you work in a school environment, it shows you just how much of a servant you really should be to the new generations and to the younger generations. As an adult, there is so much work that needs to be done for the people who are younger than you, that it couldn't possibly be all about what you want to do in this world, unless what you want to do in this world is be a servant. And so I totally agree with you there. So for people who might look at one kid as different from another, based off of whatever set of factors, what Joe is teaching us today is that kids are kids. They have emotional needs that may be tough for you to understand. But by coming back every single day, returning every single day, it helps the child, but it makes you a better person.
Absolutely. And everybody has a story.
Mm-hmm.
Through my career, I often got people saying things to me like they thought I was an only child. They, when I was here, because I was from New York and because my skin was light skin, I was rich. all of these ridiculous things that are, like, I guess, perpetuated in movies. And so I can't remember how long ago. And remember, I grew up in a home where secrets were secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point where I was working at a camp. I would go up to a running camp, and I would do weight training for the week with these kids that were hopeful to be better or elite athletes. And I drove up one day to do this weight training class, and got there, and there was this whole commotion going on, and there was and there weren't very many kids of color there, but this one kid of color was there, and I saw his face, and I was like, "That's what's going on," and there was a hubbub. Well, it turned out that this kid was in foster care. And his biological father hadn't given him permission, nor did he need the permission to go to this camp. So the camp was all, they didn't know what to do. He was threatening to sue and blah, 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 blah. And we got that all sorted out. And I went back to my cabin and I said, I can't keep this secret any longer, because everybody who knew me to that time just knew me as Joe Toles, the runner.
Oh, wow.
They only knew, I set and I still have the national high school record. So they only knew that. They only knew that. And for this one kid out of the 100 and whatever kids were there, it was my mission at that point to reveal that I was human. I was normal. And so I went back and these were round robins. I went to every group. They had the camp split in 3, and we did a session, and I did my session, and people who knew me for years were just shocked. Kids were grateful. Kids were crying. They had no idea. And so I haven't stopped. From that point on, being able to and knowing how to share my story, and feeling how hopeful it made people feel, I can't stop. I have to tell my story because I think the best thing that I can do is let people know that someone suffered before them, that somebody cried before them. But the most important thing is that somebody survived before them.
Absolutely.
And if I become lesser than, national record holder, NCAA, blah, 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 all that other stuff that's so not important, and people feel like they can do it too.
Absolutely.
So that's really, those are lessons that I learned, and I just, once I've learned them, I'm real active, so I don't let go. So it's just important for us to at least sometimes show our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So
when you decided for that one young person to let the world know that Joe Toles, the great, was a product of the child welfare system, you level the playing field so much, Joe, because there are times when you might have been in the room and people say, I can't connect to him. He's too fast. He's too elite, if you will. He's rich. He's this. He's that. I can't connect to him. Once they know that you were in child welfare, oh, that's my brother.
Yeah.
And now, guess what? Now I have subliminal permission to achieve similar heights.
It bothers me being on a pedestal. It really bothers me. I'm not any better.
No. So what we're going to do is we are going to remove the pedestal. There's no pedestal. You got rid of the pedestal when you decided to let everybody know that you were in the child welfare system. And now what I want you to do is take 10 seconds to encourage the thousands of other adults out there who they work in big buildings, they work in little buildings, they're all over. They've never told anybody that they were in foster care. And the world is that much more at a deficit because nobody knows that their coworker was in foster care as well. Provide some encouragement to them.
Well, I think that everybody hurts. Everybody has pain. Everybody has vulnerability. I think it's important for us to get to a point where we understand that, where we don't carry shame and step back into the shadows and present yourself to the world in a way that lets them see who you are, lets them see reality. And I'll tell you what, I was extremely introverted before that time, and that is all melted away. All of that burden that kept me back, that kept me hidden. And you know what? I fail. I still fail. I do projects all the time, and some of them work and some of them don't. And I have dreams that I want. Oh, well, this is going to be the one that's going to make everything different in the world, and it doesn't happen. But you know what? It's okay. It's absolutely okay to be who you are. And if people don't accept you for who you are, you have to know that there are other people out there that will.
Yeah.
There's no time to waste on trying to impress people or trying to fit into a place where, I mean, it's so much energy to use to try to belong when there are plenty of places to belong.
Yeah. I just had a thought. Youth in foster care, the entire child welfare system, young people, we are like Gotham. And Gotham is going to love you so much more once we know that you're one of us. We love you so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Toles, he went on to adopt several young people, and he made a really good video about that, and I'm going to play that as well. I'm very inspired today at his story, his journey, and the decision that he made to be a hero. Check this video out.
My name is Joe Toles. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and I have 8 kids altogether, but 6 that were adopted. This is Xavier, this is Cramel, this is John, Cameron, Sincere, and me. Well, I grew up in foster care, and then I was on my own. Luckily, I had supports outside of my home, which allowed me to go to college, and I became a therapist, a clinician. And I was waiting for that magic moment when everything would fall together and I'd have a family and I'd have kids. And years went by and that never happened. And then I started adopting kids, and I adopted the first one, and I really haven't stopped since then.
I would say the biggest impact my dad has had was just giving me another chance at life. Something that most people in the foster care system and just the child care system in general don't have. He actually gave me that opportunity, and that was just enough to, no matter through the ups and downs, just to be able to become a man of my own.
In this city alone, there are thousands of kids that are looking for a home. And I'm not talking about infants, I'm talking about teens. When they age out of the system, they have nowhere to go. Statistically, I should be in jail or dead. And I'm not, because I always had a place to go. That's what you prevent when you provide. Forget about adoption. How about just a forever home?
I came from a place that was like a lot of abuse and stuff. Like, I was going to group home, program to program. I didn't believe somebody actually would take me out of the group home. He actually came out of the way and just be like, yeah, I'll take you in. Like, I was like, I don't know what to say.
When I initially came to the Toles family, I was very lost. I didn't know a lot of what was going on. It changed me because there was always something about him that kept on pushing me just to like strive and do good as a person and just never let yourself down.
I feel like I'm gonna cry, but I do thank him so much for all that he's done for me in my life in general. Ever since he came to me, he just was very nurturing and just tried to do the best that he can, and he did.
He's one of the greatest persons I know. I really love him, and I'm so grateful to have a dad like him.
My dad is my Superman. That's all I have to say. I mean, shout out to Dad.
We are a family. Good, bad, or indifferent, we are together. And there's nothing that can happen, from my perspective, that's going to separate that. And they know that. They know that no matter what they do, no matter what they say, I'm going to be there. That's fatherhood.
I mean, shout out to Dad.
And we're back. Joe, you are so cool. I just got to get that out there.
Well, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, take that. Yeah. You know, what you decided to do is it's what I'd like to encourage a lot of people to do, is to go out there and make your life even more meaningful by changing the world of a young person who's in care right now. See, for those young men who are talking in that video, and I can relate firsthand. If anybody's watched my videos in the past, I often talk about how adoption changed my life. It changes your life. When you change one person's life, you change the world. And anybody who has the slightest glimpse of an opportunity to do that needs to put their foot in that door and see if it's possible for them to adopt. If you can adopt, be a forever friend, a forever relationship in somebody's life, because it's the number one way to make the world a better place. Now, do you have any thoughts or tips for people out there who might be considering adoption?
But yeah, I think that you have to go into it with an open mind. You have to sort of, the best you can, put your expectations aside, because there's really, for each of my kids who joined me, it changed the dynamics of my house. And the first one, luckily, was fairly easy for me. And then I was like,
he looks like you too. He looks like you too.
Yeah. So and then I'm like, okay, this is easy. Let's get another one. He wasn't there. They've taught me to love instead of run the other way. Mm-hmm. They have taught me, they sort of built this beacon of patience out of somebody who never had to answer to anybody. People often say to me, oh, they're so lucky. And it's like, oh no, I'm the lucky one. I am the one who lucked out here. And this is not to say that, because people will be able to see other videos of us where we're making pancakes together and laughing and joking. Listen, we yell, we scream, we slam doors. Names are called, but not any more or less than a biological family. Mm-hmm. And that we are going to now be able to take our issues with us through our lifetime and not have to be alone. Right. So my advice to people that want to do it, I think you need to explore it. You need to figure out what your boundaries are, because I think you're absolutely right, Cedric. The adoption would be wonderful, right? But a forever home is a step down from that. A mentor is a step down for that. Donating money to agencies and organizations so they can continue to provide these services so people can find homes is a step down from that. Not everybody can open their home and be an adoptive parent. But there's a series of classes that a potential foster parent takes, and they're called MAP classes. You take those classes just to get an idea what you can do, what you can't do, and you'll learn something more.
Are there any agencies out there who teach people about adoption that you know of?
Well, sure I do. Most of my kids came from You Gotta Believe, which is based in New York, in Brooklyn. So all but one, and my soon-to-be new one is not even from Alabama, but he's from Kentucky. But You Gotta Believe, definitely. And then I think the Dave Thomas Foundation has plenty of information about adoption and foster care, and they're an advocate for sort of connecting kids to families. So most of my kids were from You Gotta Believe, and some of them were both Wendy's Wonderful Kids, which is the Dave Thomas Foundation, including this soon-to-be 16-year-old who's going to be moving in. So those are the two agencies that I know for sure.
Okay.
With great information, and they for sure will point you in a direction to an agency or people near you if you want more information.
Okay. So, Joe, we've got about 30 seconds left. I'd love to talk more with you. We obviously could talk forever, but we only have an hour show. And so I got 3 questions that you need to answer in about 28 seconds.
Okay.
The first one, this is the hot seat part. The first one, what is survival to you?
Survival is finding a place to belong.
What is success to you?
Success is connections.
What is greatness to you?
Vulnerability.
Joe, I want to let you know that I've listened to your story today. I was most certainly inspired. And I want to give you a crown today while you're still living. Everybody out there, get your crown emojis ready. Drop them in the comment area. Yeah. I'm giving you a crown today while you're still living because you deserve it. I also want to give you your respect while you can still receive it. I want to let the world know, let you know from my perspective that you, Joe Toles, are America's next motivator.
All right.
That's what we do. Thanks for stopping by today, all right?
No, thank you, Cedric. It was
Yes,
great.
sir. All right. Talk to you later.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Each and every episode of America's Next Motivator is going to have something here for you. All you got to do, just like you did today, is stop by and pick it up.